In this episode, I'm going to talk about my cinematic heroes from the 1980s. So, stick around. Hello, fellow dorks and dorkettes, and welcome to Nostalgia Syndrome. In this episode, I'm going to talk about my cinematic heroes from the 1980s. This is actually a mini-series, if you will, and I have 3 episodes slated, each one talking about 5 different heroes of movies that I grew up loving. Now, these are characters from movies that I would pretend to be, I would dress up for as Halloween, just that were ingrained in my life for little sections of time. Some of these movies I have not seen in decades, but the feelings that they made me feel as a kid still endure. So I'm going to be approaching this as my child self and how I pretended to be these characters, how I dressed up like them for Halloween, why I idolized them. I have to say something before we begin. This channel, My Side of the Laundry Room, I've always wanted it to be a nostalgia channel. Not just a toy channel. But I have so much fun talking about toys that ends up being the only thing I talk about. I mean, there's a couple things peppered in like monsters, video games, which primarily are from the 80s, and recent things that I've been watching. But I want to open it up. I want to talk about movies and TV shows and video games and comic books. I want to talk about all those things. So, with this year, we're going to be tackling everything, hopefully. So, with that being said, this is going to be the first of the movie thing. So, hopefully it's a success and you guys like it. And like I said, this is a mini-series, so hopefully you like it enough that we'll cover all 3 of them. And hey, maybe it's something that we can just talk about other characters in movies that I didn't idolize per se or pretend to be, but still were awesome. Anyway, enough of that stuff. Let's get on to the list. Number 1 on the list is a character that rivaled almost any other character that I could have ever idolized. I mean, we're talking Luke Skywalker, we're talking Indiana Jones. This character was up there with them. So I'm going to kick off the list with it, and the other characters will show up in lists in the future. But this character is Perseus from Clash of the Titans. Portrayed by Harry Hamlin, who would later go on to superstardom in LA Law. Perseus was that character that he came from nothing. I mean, he was the son of a god, but came from nothing and became the hero of the story. That's something any kid could root for. And that was something I wanted to see in myself. I mean, I came from nothing. I was just a poor kid. And hopefully one day I could take down a Kraken, get the princess, and live happily ever after. Now, I've done all that. I got the princess and happily ever after, but I haven't been able to kill a Kraken yet. But anyway, what made Perseus so awesome was the world that he lived in. And that was a world that I also wanted to live in. You had monsters, gods, robotic owls that I wanted so bad. Bubo, I mean, I could do a whole episode just on that little owl. He was so awesome. But he had that, a helmet that made him invisible, an awesome sword, an awesome shield. I mean, I would get those plastic swords and shields and pretend to be Perseus all day long, running around outside. And sometimes, if you're lucky, that set would come with a little helmet. It never fit perfectly with the visor, but he didn't have it that long in the movie anyway. So, if you couldn't fit your head, you can move on. But, I dressed up as him for one Halloween, and unfortunately it was one of the coldest Halloweens ever, so I had to wear long johns with my toga. It just, yeah, I'll have nightmares about that forever because just how horrible it looked, and I was running around in long underwear. I mean, I guess I didn't have any shame. But I had my plastic sword and shield, so I was the hero. I was getting candy. All was well with the world. Clash of the Titans was one of the earliest memories I have of going to the movie theater in 1981. I remember walking into the theater. Unfortunately, the moment I walked in, yeah, it had nudity. And of course, it was still rated PG back then, but it had nudity galore. And yeah, that was the first time I ever saw that in a movie. And yeah, quite informative for a child. But another great thing about it, and here we go back to toys, the toy line by Mattel was awesome. I had a few of them. I had Calibus, who is still one of the greatest cinematic villains, Perseus, Pegasus, and that was it. Those were the three I had. Those were the three that you needed. I mean, they were the essential characters. Perseus, awesome. Calibus, great. Pegasus, that was a neat toy. I forgot Pegasus. I mean, on top of all that stuff, he rode a winged horse. I mean, Perseus was awesome. Now, number 2 on the list is from a movie that is kind of before my time at the cinema, but was one that I watched a lot on VHS, and it would come on TV every once in a while, and that is Sinbad, from Sinbad and the Eye of the Tiger, which was released in 1977. Now, you can say what you will about Patrick Wayne, who portrayed Sinbad in this, not being authentic, it being kind of whitewashing, but as a kid, you didn't think about that kind of stuff. You just saw a tough, rugged dude fighting some of the best creatures that Ray Harryhausen ever made. And like Perseus, which I should have mentioned when talking about him, one thing that makes a hero great is their villain. And the Minotaur is one of the best villains ever. A giant robotic Minotaur who, little factoid, was portrayed by Peter Mayhew, who would later play Chewbacca. So, neat little factoid there. Now, the true villain of the whole story is a witch who ends up with a seagull's leg because she got caught in mid-transformation because she would turn into a seagull to spy on Sinbad. But the Minotaur was where it was at for me. And all the monsters in this. I mean, you had the giant saber-toothed tiger, you had the troglodyte, you even had the baboon, that was the prince that was transformed. Great effects work by Ray Harryhausen. I mean, that alone fills a kid's mind with some of the best imagination possible. But yet again, me with a plastic sword running around, wanting to be Sinbad, fighting those monsters. I mean, I would just have so much fun running around my backyard, climbing trees, doing everything a hero would do. Now, number 3 on the list is Ace Hunter from the movie Megaforce. Released in 1982, Megaforce pretty much was a movie version of G.I. Joe. You had a secret government organization of people that were characters, or more of stereotypes. You know, dude wore a cowboy hat, so he was a cowboy guy, and stuff like that. They had some of the greatest machinery, some of the greatest vehicles, but Ace Hunter, as their leader, rode a motorcycle. And this motorcycle was enough for me to want to emulate him so badly. He was portrayed by Barry Bostwick, that is not known for his action movies, and I honestly don't think he was in any before or after. Of course, his biggest claim to fame before was being in Rocky Horror Picture Show, and after, he's been in everything. But let's get on to the bike. This bike had rockets, had machine guns, and could fly. So when you're a kid on a bike, pedaling through town, in your driveway, wherever, any jump you hit, you would pretend to be flying like he did. And what kid wouldn't want a bicycle with machine guns? I mean, I would grab the handlebars and pretend to be pushing buttons and riding down. And of course, at this time, I probably still had training wheels on my bike, so probably wasn't going that fast, but yeah, and then you'd pull up a little bit and you're firing rockets. Yeah, it was awesome. There's still a place where I would ride my bike as a kid that I still dream about today because it was perfect. It was down a hill, a sidewalk, that there were trees every so often, and their roots were so big that it pushed the sidewalk up into these little ramps. You go down that hill and you would jump those ramps, and yeah, I would be flying just like he did on his motorcycle. Now, number 4 on the list is Dar from Beastmaster, portrayed by Mark Singer, who was just awesome. He portrayed the Beastmaster for a few films. He was in the V series. I mean, the dude was awesome. Yet again, this is another character that rivaled even Luke Skywalker in my pantheon of heroes because he had animals and he could talk to them and they would do stuff for him and attack people. He had 2 black-footed ferrets. What were their names? Oh, Kodo and Podo. Yeah, I think that's it. And he'd have them in a little satchel. I would pretend I had them in a little satchel when I ran around. And man, I wanted ferrets so bad when I was a kid. That was the only pet that I really wanted. I still would love a ferret now and probably name it after one of them. But those little things were so awesome. They would steal keys, steal bags, steal clothes, because just like Clash of the Titans, this movie had its fair share of nudity. And he had a black tiger, he had a hawk. Well, I say black tiger, it was a panther, but you could see stripes on it, so I'm going to say black tiger. Anyway, that just sounds cool. Sounds like a Mexican wrestler. But yeah, I wanted to be him so bad. He had an awesome sword. He had awesome animals. Yet again, give me that plastic sword and I could be any one of these characters. Well, except for Ace Hunter. You need a bike for that. And a gun. But yeah, run around in the backyard with a sword, hitting trees, yeah, chopping down grass, whatever. I mean, yeah, Beastmaster was one of the biggest films to me in that era. Now, number 5 on the list is probably, I probably saw this movie way too young. It came out in 1985, so I was 9. But it was one that I rented so much. And when it came on cable, I taped it and watched it all the time. But the character is John Matrix from Commando, portrayed by Arnold Schwarzenegger in one of his best movies. John Matrix was one of the toughest special operatives ever. I mean, the dude carried a log, not a log, a whole tree over his shoulder. Now, the story of the movie is that his daughter is kidnapped, which I had a big crush on Alyssa Milano at the time, so that helped. But his daughter gets kidnapped by a horrible mercenary guy, and they're trying to get him to kill him for the most part. So he goes to get his daughter, and he goes into escapades around town, which he ends up getting a large armory of weapons and missile launchers. And he goes to the island on a plane because he kidnaps Ray Dawn Chon's character and makes her fly him there. But they become friends later or whatever. But yeah, as soon as he sets foot on that island and he straps on his boots and puts on his flak jacket, he's ready to go. And so many people die. Now, I know that's not something to glorify, but when you're a kid and it's happening in the most outlandish ways possible, you just love it. I mean, everything from a saw blade through a dude's head to that missile launcher, like I said, blowing up jeeps and stuff. machine guns, pistols, a full armory at his disposal, and he uses it all. Machetes. I mean, it's some of the most gratuitous violence, but yeah, when you're 9, 10, it makes you giddy with excitement. Now, I would try to find long cardboard boxes and put them over my shoulder and pretend they were the missile launcher. I would use any of my toy guns and squirt guns, and I would run around the backyard, taking out imaginary mercenaries, saving the day, just being awesome like Arnold Schwarzenegger was in that part. Anyway, that was just a short list of 5 cinematic heroes of the 1980s that I looked up to, that I pretended to be, that I even dressed up for as Halloween. Now, there's some more Halloween ones in lists later, but for right now, I was Perseus for Halloween. A disastrous Halloween, but I was him nonetheless. I hope you liked this episode. There's going to be 2 more parts to it, so I hope you guys dig it. And like I said, this is just a personal recollection of these heroes through my eyes, through the eyes of a child. Pretty much from the age of 5 to 9 to 10, somewhere in there. These were characters that I loved portraying. Anyway, like I said, I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. If you got something to say, please leave a comment. I love reading them, and I love getting back to everybody. And if you're new around here and you enjoyed this, or any of the episodes that YouTube is recommending down here, please hit subscribe. And if you hit that little bell icon, you'll be notified whenever there's a new episode. So, until next time, thanks for watching. Keep being rad, and stay dorky.